He followed the directions Tracy had given him and turned right, then left into the administration office. The harried-looking woman at the counter gave Booth the eyeball, then flicked a glance back at the boy sulking on the other side of the barrier. You get on back to class now, Kevin. He sulked his way out, and Booth caught the faintest whiff of pot clinging to his hoodie. Good afternoon. Booth stepped up. I have an appointment with Principal Downey. Sebastian Booth. I know. She's squeezing you in. Throwing the rest of the day off schedule. She pushed a button. Principal Downey, your unscheduled appointment's here. Okay, Marva. Send him right in. Marva pointed to a door with the word principal etched on the frosted glass. I reckon you can read if you're after a teaching position. Yes, ma'am, thanks. Sorry about the schedule, he added as he crossed to the door. Marva said, Before he could knock, the door opened. He researched Lorna Dorney and knew she had graduated from the school she now ran before pursuing her degree at the University of Maryland. He knew she was a mother of 3, grandmother of 2. He knew she had been married to Jacob Poe for 29 years. He knew she was the same age, 52, as the headmistress in Georgia. But that, as far as he could see, was where the similarity ended. She was short and wiry, with her highlighted brown hair whacked into a short cap. Brown eyes studied him as she reached out a hand to shake. She wore a basketball jersey in the school colors of red and white. She had a tattoo on her ropey left biceps in Mandarin. Mr. Booth, thanks for coming right in. Please excuse the wardrobe and the disarray. We're having a rally for the basketball team. I appreciate you fitting me in. No problem, no problem. She gestured to a chair before she crossed to her desk and its current disarray. Coffee? No thanks. He always felt obligated to explain. I don't really drink it. She nodded as she hit the pot on a hot plate of mug. And what planet are you from again? The planet Coke. She held up 2 fingers, opened the door of a little cold box. She had a bright red tracker watch on her wrist. Only got Pepsi. She offered him a bottle. I'll suffer through it without judgment. She sat, leaned back, studied him over the rim of the mug as she drank her coffee black. You have an impressive application. Resume is a little thin with all the traveling you've done. Seeing the world, visiting countries where English isn't the first language is another form of education. He gave a slight nod to her tattoo. Teachers open the door, but you must walk through yourself. I wanted to try a lot of doors. You read Mandarin? A little. I didn't notice that on your list. Only a little, so I can't claim to be fluent. But you are in several other languages. Still, you've opted to focus on English and theater as an educator. I did some tutoring in high school and in college, so I knew where I wanted to focus. I didn't know I wanted to teach at all, really. I considered it a fallback sort of thing until I didn't. A man in your position financially doesn't need a fallback. Travel's educational. It's exciting and it's satisfying, but it's not a purpose. It took me some time, but I figured out I wanted to open doors. That's a good answer. She took another long sip of coffee. I just got off the phone with the headmistress of your school in New York. How is she? She seems well, and very sorry to lose you. She had a great deal of complimentary things to say about your intellect, but I could glean that myself by the transcripts. She tells me you have a way of connecting with students and a skill for reading the room, a true love for education and the arts. Nice job, Mags, he thought. I appreciate all of that. My mother and my aunt gave me the gift of books, the love of stories. Books and theater tell stories and can draw students in, open those doors, encourage questions, participation, build confidence. I agree. And still, West Bend is a long way from New York, in distance, in culture, in pace. And West Bend High's a long way from a fancy private school. No pushover, this Principal Downey, he thought, and realized he wanted the damn job, this damn job, as much as he wanted that damn house. He wouldn't charm his way into it, not with this woman, and he figured her bullshit meter was fine-tuned, so straight truth. Which is why I'm here. I had an interview with a private academy a few days ago, and I realized immediately it wasn't a good fit. If they offer me the position, and you don't, I'll take it, because I want to teach. But it wouldn't be my first choice. I want to teach in a structure that isn't so rigid and privileged, where the students come from the area, where they live, where they learn. I want that sense of community and connection. You don't have a Shakespeare club. She lifted her eyebrows. No, we don't. You have the drama club, and that's important for the students who have that passion. Down on the feeding chain, I expect and understand, from the football team, basketball, and so on. I get that. But Shakespeare can speak to a lot of young minds if you open the door the right way. And once they walk through, worlds open. I'd like to start one, if I join the staff here. I'll warn you, it would be on your own time and a very small group. I've got time, and starting small isn't a problem. She sat back again, swiveled left and right in her chair. Let's talk a little about your teaching philosophies and the rules of the road, such as they are at WHS. They talked another 30 minutes, during which he realized he liked her on a personal level, and he wanted to work with her nearly as much as he wanted the job and the house. You're young, she added, and damn good looking. Please don't sue me for that observation. They'll think they can eat you alive. He smiled. They'll find out I am hard to chew and tougher to swallow. She swiveled again. How soon can you start? Really? They're making mincemeat out of the subs in Hubbard's classes because they can. And because they can, they're not learning on the level they should be. The spring musical is both important and popular, and they haven't picked the play, held auditions. Grease. It's relatable because it's about high school. The costumes and makeup aren't complicated. You can tailor the choreography to the skill sets. I'd need to look at the space, see the tech, but that's an easy pick, especially if you're pressed. She set the mug aside, rubbed lightly at her eyes. We did Grease. It has to be 10 or 12 years back. I was still searching, hadn't moved into administration. Big hit, so I repeat, when can you start? He decided to echo Tracy. How about now? It wasn't quite that simple, but it was close. Within 2 weeks, he bought the house and moved right in by agreeing to rent it until closing. He met his fellow teachers, attended his first basketball game, familiarized himself with those who'd be his students. Instagram and TikTok were treasure troves there, and Facebook filled in from the parental and grandparents' end of things. He did the paperwork and paid the fees to authorize the school's performance of Grease, and posted a notice for auditions, posted another for a Shakespeare club. He had to furnish the house, outfit the kitchen, and he shopped local. Slowly, carefully, he began to knit himself into the fabric of the community. Being part of the whole meant you blended in. Outsiders stuck out. He felt confident at the head of a classroom and mildly terrified of producing and directing a high school musical. Some did try to chew and swallow, but he'd prepared for that. It started on day one, class one. The smirking kid in the back of his lit class had a smattering of teenage acne and a bad attitude. Since the sub had assigned To Kill a Mockingbird the week before, he opened the class to discussion, and the smirking kid called out, "What's the point of reading stuff by dead white guys anyway? It's got nothing to do with now." Actually, Harper Lee's a dead white woman, and I take it it's Kirby, right? He noted the boys' surprised reaction to being addressed by name. Yeah, so? I take it you haven't cracked the book as yet, or you'd know this particular story has a great deal to do with now. Since you haven't, you can listen to the discussion, which today is going to explore the narration of Scott, a young white girl, and the racial stereotypes, racism, and racial injustice, all of which still exists in the now. She relates throughout the story. Kirby shrugged, folded his arms over his chest, and closed his eyes as if taking a nap. Snickers ensued. And, Kirby, after reading the assigned book, you'll write an essay, 500 words, supporting your statement or mine, your choice. That popped his eyes open. You can't make me write that crap and nobody else. Write it or don't. Don't. Find another class, because I am in charge of this one. You made a statement, now you'll back it up, or retract it, in 500-word essay. You're one student in a class of 24, Kirby, and you've wasted enough of everyone's time complaining. I'll add this. He paused, waiting for the mutters of Snickers shuffling to quiet down. A lot of the required reading books might seem out of step, at least on the surface, and not all of them are going to interest some of you, maybe most. So, with that in mind, every 4 weeks, we're doing a free read. You read what you want and turn in a report on it. Deadpool, somebody shouted. Graphic novels accepted. The kid, Ethan, Booth remembered, stared in shock. No joke? In this class, we respect the written word. We may not agree with the writer, we may not enjoy the story or characters, but we respect the written word, and we're free to express our opinions on a book, positive or negative. Now, back to Scott. He got through the first day, then the second. He held auditions with the help of a music and choral instructor, and got through those with some very pleasant surprises. Vocally, he had some strong voices to work with. On the acting side, a few with actual talent and more with potential, and a lot of energy. He sweated over casting because he remembered what it was like when he'd still been able to try out for a high school play, then wait for the posting of the cast, the crew, the understudies. A week flowed into 2, and 2 weeks into a month, crowded with lesson plans, rehearsals, club meetings. He had a total of 5 for the Shakespeare, staff meetings, grading papers. He'd known, of course, teaching involved a lot more than teaching, but now he experienced it. He took time to install a security system and a secondary one on the bedroom upstairs he used to store his tools and wardrobe and the rest of his night work business, though he felt a twinge now and then and a genuine yearning more than once to stand in a darkened house that belonged to someone else. He stuck to the rules of his sabbatical for the remainder of the school year. He attended graduation, as some of his students wore cap and gown, and decided it served as a kind of graduation for himself, too. He'd opened some doors, he handled more than a few problems, and he directed a pretty damn good play. More, he'd enjoyed it all. Now, with summer vacation around the corner and some actual time off, he'd do more kayaking on his river, spend a lazy morning, or even now and again sitting on his deck or patio. He'd read for pleasure, maybe have a barbecue with the other teachers and staff. And if he took a trip to the wealthy DC suburbs and their lovely old homes filled with lovely things over the long summer, a man had to keep his hand in. He planned for a year, possibly 2, as Sebastian Booth, high school teacher, avid kayaker, theater enthusiast, and Shakespeare buff. He liked himself in the role and enjoyed, more than he'd imagined, lighting a spark in a student. He attended his second graduation and then his third. With his third, he watched Kirby, initial antagonists turned solid B student, cross the stage in cap and gown. It made him proud of the boy and of himself for finding the key to Kirby's particular look. On that third summer, he weighed the pros and cons, stay or go. The pros came easy. He liked his house, the area, the people, the work, and all of that snuggled into a spot just remote enough to keep Laporte sniffing elsewhere. In fact, it seemed next to impossible Laporte would continue to waste time and resources in pursuit of a single thief. But the next to impossible carried weight. He felt comfortable in Sebastian Booth's skin, and that ranked high. The fact he could see himself remaining in that skin for the long haul straddled the pro-con fence. Ranking high on the cons? However comfortable the skin, it didn't allow him to forge serious personal relationships. He had far too many reasons to avoid that basic human need. Friendships? All good. The occasional and mutually agreed casual sex? No problem. But he couldn't risk real intimacy or a lasting connection. Then again, he didn't see how that changed if he bailed out and picked it all up somewhere else as someone else. Here, he had the change of seasons, and he'd seen them all now. The burgeoning banquet of spring, the sticky hot summer, the heartbreaking colors of autumn, and the quiet blanket of winter. Whenever he went, wherever he went, he needed to find somewhere that gave him the same sense of peace and purpose. As summer dragged her sweaty feet toward her finish line, he found himself back in the classroom. He looked out at the fresh new faces, the bored eyes, the eager ones. Good morning, I'm Sebastian Booth, and this is Language Arts. We'll be exploring various genres of literature, your critical thinking and writing skills. We'll start discussions on the first assigned book, William Golding's Lord of the Flies, next week. You can find it in the school library the town library, at Books on Main, and possibly on a shelf in your own home. He noted who wrote it all down, who stared out the window or up at the ceiling, and the pair who sat just across from each other, who texted back and forth. I can make you read those texts out loud to the whole class before I take the phones, he said casually. Or you can put the phones away. Phones vanished into pockets. Good choice. He decided staying for maybe just one more year also made a good choice. He fell into a routine that took him straight into winter break, classwork, prep work, club meetings, auditions, then rehearsals for 4 weddings and a funeral, the senior class play, the various skits and monologues for his theater students. Add the in-depth discussions and debates on As You Like It and his now 12-member Shakespeare Club. Building sets, building minds. He had a tree in the window, lights glowing on the eaves of his front porch, and a double batch of ice and decorated sugar cookies in a tin to take to Lorna's, Principal Downey's, Holidays Bash. He left the house in a festive mood, only more lifted by the brisk air and a killer full moon. He looked forward to socializing with fellow teachers, friends, and others who made up Lorna's wide circle. He tended to spend most evenings at home, but he never missed a Lorna's holiday party and hosted an annual summer barbecue himself. He dropped in for a pizza in town, had become a regular at Books on Main, though he backed off the urging to lead a book club or just join. Until the depths of winter, he could be seen most weekends kayaking on the river. He'd seriously considered getting a dog, but managed to fall back on what he determined was common sense and let it go. Cars already crammed the drive and the street in front of Lorna and her husband Jacob's house. They didn't stint on decorations. The entire 2 stories, with attached garage, winked in lights, as did the big maple that shaded the front yard. Elves scattered under it, and Santa rode his sleigh behind Rudolph on the rooftop. Christmas might be over, and the world heading fast forward a new year, but here Christmas lived and lived bright. He didn't have to knock or ring the bell. An invitation to Lorna's meant, "Come on in." So he did, into lights and Christmas carols. People crowded into the living room and straight back to the kitchen, with its long peninsula loaded with food. Knowing the routine, he greeted and was greeted as he made his way back to the den to ditch his coat, then into the kitchen to put the cookies out on the already crowded dessert table. Tracy, decked out in Christmas red, came up to kiss his cheek. They'd dated a little, slept together twice, but both agreed friendship worked better for them. He'd gone to her wedding the previous spring. Merry and happy. You brought those damn cookies, didn't you? Guilty. My hips expand just thinking about them. She grabbed one anyway. You look amazing as always. I feel amazing. I sealed a deal on the rental about a mile from you, 6-month lease, dead of winter, and to a celebrity. Wow. Tell me it's Jennifer Lawrence. She owns my heart. That earned an elbow poke and laugh. I wish. But she's your kind of celebrity. You have to come meet her. She started scanning the crowd. Her godmother moved here a few years ago after a divorce. to get out of Dodge, so to speak. She's an old friend of Lorna's, and our celeb's here to spend some time with his godmother while she researches the area. And here she is. How's it going? Sebastian, I've got someone you have to meet. He turned and the world dropped away. She'd drawn her hair back with two little braids over her ears, so the rest fell, sun-drenched autumn leaves, down her back. Those eyes of that witchy green stared straight into his. He saw shock register. Miranda Emerson, best-selling novelist, Sebastian Booth. Sebastian's busy installing a love for books and theater at West Bend High. Sebastian, she said, very slowly, very deliberately. She could destroy everything with a word, and he couldn't blame her. A word, and he'd get out, grab his go bag, and be gone. It didn't seem to matter. Nothing did. But he reached out a hand, took hers. It's nice to meet you. I really like your work. Do you? He wondered if only he heard that edge. I do. I'm halfway through Counterpoint. Sebastian almost single-handedly keeps books on Main in business, and it turns out the two of you are neighbors, or will be when you move in. Neighbors. Not an edge this time, he thought, but a kind of stunned laugh. Sebastian's house is about half a mile from yours on the river. Oh, I see Marcy Babcock's cornered my Nick again. She always wanted to sue somebody. Let me go save him. He waited a beat, then said her name, just her name, Miranda. Don't. I'm not going to make a scene and embarrass my godmother or Lorna. Not here, not now. She walked away, and her scent lingered. He couldn't just slip out, not without generating a lot of questions. Instead, he poured himself a half glass of wine. He could stay out of her way for an hour. He didn't think his system could take more than an hour. He gravitated toward a group, slid into it, blended while everything inside him twisted and churned. He'd have to leave, no question of that. How he left depended on Miranda. If she'd give him time, he'd create an emergency, list a house with Tracy, give Lorna a little time to replace him or line up subs. If she didn't, he'd pack up what he needed, say goodbye to Sebastian Booth, and disappear. Maybe head west this time. Maybe freaking Alaska would be far enough away that fate couldn't put her in front of him again. Couldn't put her where she stirred up all those old feelings, the ones he'd tried to lock away. Now she'd cracked the combination just by being. Those feelings were the only thing that hadn't changed in a dozen years. He was still in love with her. He talked, even laughed. He hugged Lorna and gave Jacob the man version thereof. He nursed that half glass of wine for the full hour. He spotted her a couple of times, that hair spilling down the back of a forest green dress. She met his eyes once, when she sat with Andy and Caroline, Stipper, the owners of the bookstore, and that look nearly dropped him to his knees. He retrieved his coat, then slipped out the back like a thief. He drove home on autopilot, the festive mood shattered, and then just sat in his car, put his head back, closed his eyes as everything she'd realized swam through him. His life, the life here he admitted now he'd wanted to keep, to build, to belong to, that was done. And he accepted that. But how could he accept he'd never have a real life anywhere under any name because he couldn't have her? What kind of world was it that demanded he feel this, all of this, for the one woman out of his reach? Reality, he muttered as he slammed out of the car. It's just bloody reality. He'd nearly made it to the door when he spotted the headlights. His world shook one more time as the car pulled in behind his. She hadn't wasted time. He waited while she walked, the heels of her boots clicking on the slate. He started to speak without a clue what to say, and her fist plowed with considerable force into his gut. She knocked the wind out of him. He had to suck it back in, ease it out again. I deserved that. You deserve a fist in the face, you absolute prick. But giving you a black eye would bring on too many questions. You're right, both counts. It's cold. Do you want to come in? No, but I will. He unlocked the door, reset the alarm once inside. Let me take your coat. Don't touch me. She swung off the coat herself as she crossed the living room to toss it over a chair. Okay, can I get you a drink or... Oh, please. She looked like a warrior, ready for a battle she'd surely win. He saw pieces of the girl he'd known and loved, but the woman had a toughness she hadn't. She had a vibrating confidence and a lot of righteous fury. Sebastian Booth? What kind of bullshit is that? And you're teaching? Do you even have a degree? What the hell is your name? Here and now, it's Sebastian Booth. Don't make me quote Shakespeare on names. I'm not going to tell you because it's better for both of us. You're a liar, and don't think I'm going to buy into your lies the way I did when I was 20. Answer my questions, or I go straight to Lorna, and your little game here is done. It's not a game, not the way you mean. But I'll go, I'll leave. If you could give me a few days, I'll... Fury had the roses in her cheeks, blooming hot. Take off like before? Leave Lorna in the lurch? Desert the kids she claims you teach so creatively, just like you? She whirled away, whirled back. Will your mythical aunt have another car accident? She's not mythical. She didn't have an accident, but she's not mythical. Anyone who'd lie about his mother dying of cancer would lie about anything. Stop. His voice whipped out on that, and he found some of his own temper simmering. I was 9 the first time my mother had cancer, the first time she went through the tests, through all the treatments, and sicked up her guts from them. Think whatever you want about me, you are entitled, but don't diminish what she went through. She wasn't even 30 the first time, and she didn't live to see 40. Then why all the lies, Booth? You broke my bloody heart and made me ashamed of what I had felt for you, what I did with you. You cheapened everything. You cheapened me. I meant to. I didn't know any other way. There was someone who wanted me to do something, who didn't give me a choice. To get it done and to get out. I had to go, just go, and I thought, I believed, making you hate me was better for you. That's not good enough, not even close. I cried buckets over you. You hurt me, Booth, the way no one ever had or has again. Someone, something, not good enough. You're standing here in a house a high school teacher shouldn't be able to afford. You're using another name, and, according to Lorna, you graduated from Northwestern, which is another lie and fraud. You were in North Carolina. So who and what and why? She perched on the arm of a chair, didn't sit, he thought, as that was too casual, too friendly. She perched there, gestured to him. I get some truth, or I swear to God, I will punch you in the face on my way to a serious conversation with Lorna. He saw something he hadn't wanted to. Under the fury in those eyes lived hurt. He was done here, he reminded himself. He could give her some truth first. His name's Laporte, and he wanted me to steal a bronze sculpture, Belladonna. It was worth several million then. Probably double that now since the theft. She cocked her head, arched that eyebrow. Why in the hell would somebody want or expect you to steal a statue? Because that's what I do. I steal things. He sat now, partly because he took a weight off just to say it. She clearly didn't believe him. Rather than shock at his revelation, she showed a derision. So at about the age of 20, you're forced by this Lepore to steal a valuable piece of art, successfully, I assume. I'm good at what I do. Right. She pushed up. I guess we're done here. Look it up. Take out your phone. Google it. Belladonna, bronze. Artist Giulietta Castelletti, stolen from the Hobart, a private museum in Baltimore, just a few weeks after I left. She took out her phone, and while she keyed in the details, he continued. I took it to him at his place in Lake Charles, Louisiana, Christmas Day. Then I changed my name and my look again. That's something else I'm good at. And I chartered a plane to Paris. I needed to keep away from him because he'd just do the same thing again and again. It's a power trip for him. She looked up from her phone. Just because you know some details about this art theft doesn't mean you took it or that anything you're telling me is the truth. For Christ's sake, he pushed up, moved toward the fireplace, brushing by her on the way. I'm going to light the fire. What time is it? She looked immediately at her watch. A very nice Baume and Mercier, but it wasn't there. He held it up. This is yours. Now he saw, if not shock, surprise. I've been picking pockets since I was a kid in Chicago with a sick mother and a mountain of debt. He handed the watch back to her, then lit the starter under the kindling and logs. I left and did the job for Laporte because he threatened to hurt Mags, my aunt. He sent someone to wreck her place when she wasn't there to prove he could. He would have hurt her. He might have hurt you, my friends, anybody I cared about. That's what he does, and he's good at it. The firelight streamed across his face as he looked up at her. So I left, and to hurt you. You're a thief. That's right. He pushed to his feet. Jewelry and art, primarily. Stamps and coins. But they're not as satisfying. Satisfying? She stood, stared at him. You steal from people. You're a criminal. And it's satisfying? I'm trying not to lie to you. You break down doors and... No, I don't. I deal with locks and security systems. I don't break anything. No violence against people or property. Major rule. You have rules? Yeah, I have rules. A pretty long list, actually. I'm getting some wine. You can have some or not. He walked back into the kitchen and chose a nice Chianiti from the rack. You invade people's privacy and take what doesn't belong to you for money. He pulled the cork, got 2 glasses. He looked at her as he poured. Coolly. You never once, not once, had to worry about the roof of that big, beautiful 4-generation house staying over your head. Never once had to wonder if there was enough money to buy food. Never heard your mom crying at night when she thought you were asleep because the bills just kept coming. Hospital bills, doctor bills, mortgage payments, insurance that covered Dick, all when it came down to it. You grew up privileged, so don't lecture me on what I've done for money. How I grew up has nothing to do with it. How I did has everything to do with it, he snapped back. She did everything right. We lived within our means. Bills got paid. She started a business and worked her ass off. She saved what she could, a cushion, she'd say. She wanted enough of one so we could take a vacation, a week at the beach. She wanted to see the ocean. Then none of that mattered anymore. Doing everything right didn't mean a damn thing. She got better for a while, remission, yay. Then it came back, and a little harder, bills, 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 and her hair falling out in clumps again, then remission again, and back again. Third strike, you're out. Have you ever watched someone you love die of cancer? Miranda shook her head, picked up the wine, drank. Don't lecture me about the choices I've made. Why are you here? Why are you teaching in a school in West Bend, Virginia? Laporte got a little too close when I was still living and working in Europe. Maybe I got careless or too comfortable, I don't know, but he got too close. So I closed up shop there, so to speak, did some more traveling, and then came back to the States. Teaching's a good cover. A cover? You've developed an annoying habit of repeating what I say. Well, excuse me while I stand here and you tell me you're some international art thief, jewel thief, stamps and coins and pickpocket thief. You wanted to hear the truth. You're hearing it. I came here to this school because they clicked for me. This house clicked for me. I've stayed longer than I planned because I like it. I like it here. I like teaching and putting on high school plays, watching kids light up, and I'm good at it. So I've extended my sabbatical. Sabbatical? There you go again. Her eyes flashed temper, but she took a slow sip of wine. So you've been taking a sabbatical from stealing things? He drank again, let out a breath, mostly. And that means school breaks, I might take a trip. How's busman's holiday sound? Jesus, Booth. I don't do any night work there. I don't steal from people here. Not that people around here are ass deep in invaluable jewels and art, but I just don't. Another rule? One of the first. I never planned on staying more than a couple of years, but I'm going to be sorry to leave. I'm trying to be sorry. I saw you again, but I can't. I never could put you all the way behind me. No flash of temper this time, just cold as steel. You don't want to go there. You'll end up with that black eye. Okay, but consider I've got Wonder Woman's golden lasso around me, so I have to tell the truth. What's your real name? Not telling you isn't lying. That's not how the golden lasso works. You got me on that. I'm amending it. I still have people to protect. She wandered back to the fire, stood studying it. I'm asking myself if I'm an idiot because I believe at least most of what you've told me. There's no reason to lie once I started. I'm sorry about your mother, Booth. I'm sorry things were so hard and sad for you as a kid. You're right. I've never experienced anything close to that fear and grief, but I can't justify stealing your way through life. I don't expect you to. It's my choice. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. She turned back. Do you have a gun? A gun? No. Why would I? For when you steal. Jesus, no. I don't have a gun. I've never even held a gun. I don't want to. I steal things, Miranda. They're things. Beautiful things, shiny things, even important things, but they're not human beings, not flesh and blood. What do you do if you're stealing something and get caught? It hasn't happened. Ever? No, I'm good at it. Look, I get what you're asking. No, I've never bashed someone or shot somebody, stabbed, choked, or otherwise physically hurt anyone. Things, Miranda. People matter a whole lot more than things. He paced. I don't, pull a mask on and bust up somebody's house or some jewelry store. I don't smash and grab. It's not how I work. It felt awkward and a little embarrassing, but he continued. In Europe, they started calling me the chameleon. That's another reason I pulled out. Somebody's pinned down your style, your method, and that means somebody's too close. You can look that up too. It's just speculative stuff, but you can look it up. I will. I won't talk to Lorna tonight, but if and when, if you could give me 24 hours just today, if I agree to that, will you still be here in the morning? Yes, lasso's still on. My life's in your hands. I guess you deserve that too. You're here for 6 months. I won't leave until you say it's fine or it's time. I could finish out the school year. You may not believe it, but that's important to me. I've got some kids who I'd like to see them through the year. If you're here in the morning, I'll agree to the 24 hours. If you're gone, I contact the police and tell them everything you told me. Harsh, but fair. I'll be here. She picked up her coat. I'm going to think about everything you told me. Then I'll then I'll let you know what I decide, if you're still here. She picked up her coat and, shrugging into it, started for the door. I really do love your work, he told her. Even though you killed me pretty gruesomely in Publish or Perish. She glanced back. It felt good, liberating. I bet, he murmured, when she closed the door behind her. He sat by the fire, just put his head in his hands. He could run, grab what he needed, wipe down the house, get into the school, do the same with his classroom. The sensible thing to do, take off, disappear. Again, but this time around, he wouldn't do the sensible. He'd put his life in her hands, and he'd leave it there. Miranda sat bleary-eyed over her first cup of coffee in the sweet little kitchen in her sweet little rental. She hadn't slept well, not with her mind churning and a vague anxiety over the possibility of a break-in. Clearly, she knew someone capable of it. She believed him. She didn't want to believe him because she'd gotten comfortable thinking of Booth as a lying bastard, which he was, as she reminded herself, so she could stay comfortable there. But she believed him about being a thief and traveling the world doing just that. On a side note, she had to admit she really wanted to know how he'd gotten the watch off her wrist in a snap without her feeling a thing. She certainly believed him about his mother and could see very well how that long-going childhood trauma had formed him. But if she let herself believe him fully on this Laporte character, it changed things, made things very uncomfortable. She slid off the stool at the counter to go into the living room, a short trip, and switch on the gas logs in the fireplace. The cozy two-bedroom with its river view suited her needs for the short term, but it was a long way from the big, sprawling home she'd lived in most of her life. She'd promised her godmother a visit, and since her father was living the dream as a guest lecturer at Oxford for the next few months, it seemed the right time. Add in the idea of moving out of her, comfort zone, by setting a book off her home turf, it all made sense. Seska, her godmother, also had a sweet little house, one right in town. Because she needed more room and the privacy to work, she lovingly but firmly rejected Seska's entreaties to stay with her. This worked. It all seemed to work perfectly until Days after, she'd celebrated Christmas with her father at home, driven him to the airport on a bright Boxing Day morning, less than 24 hours after she'd snapped up the rental and moved in. She'd gone to the party at Lorna's, and he'd been there, the boy who'd crushed her heart to pulp. What are you going to do about it, Miranda? Just what the hell are you going to do? She didn't know, and had spent much of the sleepless night on that single question. What she did know, he held a teaching job without accreditation. He held it under a name that wasn't his own, or probably wasn't. How would she know? Maybe, like Fagin, he trained impressionable kids into his personal gang of thieves. A stretch, sure, but how would she know? She did what she always did when tackling a problem. She sat down with a second cup of coffee and her notebook. She made a list. Make sure the son of a bitch didn't just take off. Laporte, Lake Charles, Louisiana research. Chameleon, Europe research. Discuss subtly. Sebastian Booth with Seska Lorna Tracy. Visit high school, observe. Visit bookstore, ask questions carefully. She'd add to the list, no doubt, but considered it a good start. And she decided to start right away, crossing items off that list. She dressed, braided her hair, and applied careful makeup to disguise a restless night. The school had to wait until after the holiday break, but she could start covering some ground. Though it sat in opposite direction from town, she drove by Booth's house first. His car sat under the carport and smoke curled up from the chimney. Not absolute proof, she thought, but proof enough he hadn't taken off. She turned around, headed into town. She liked the look of the area, the way the road followed the river, the glimpses of mountains, the thick stretches of woods. She could paint a solid story on this canvas, she thought. Pull herself off her home turf and see what happened. The town worked too, not too small. You'd constantly trip over someone you knew every time you took a step, but small enough you'd likely see friendly and familiar faces often. The little harbor added the feel of a water town, and just the right ambiance, with a hardy main street and all the offshoots. She liked seeing the lights and decorations on most stores, most houses, and wondered what everything looked like when it snowed. Really snowed. She found parking and took a stroll in the brisk breeze off the water. And the party, she'd managed to dance around the requests for a book signing, though she couldn't imagine there'd come a time when she didn't feel grateful and just a little amazed anyone wanted her to sign her work. She wanted to settle in first, and really wanted to dig into the story she'd barely begun to write. No question this bookstore visit would box her in there, but she'd pay that price. Seeing her book on display in the front window gave her a happy little jolt. Something else she couldn't imagine, fading in time. She admired the way whoever did the window arranged books, with sidelines like candles, tote bags, and already she knew she'd walk out with one of the t-shirts that read, I enjoy long romantic walks through the bookstore. She stepped inside, and as often happened on romantic walks, fell a little in love. She saw a cozy chair with a stack of books on the table beside it. Shelves of books, of course, with a rack of the bestsellers. Hers stood there, more amazement. Her second novel had crawled briefly onto the bottom of the list, and her third hit dead center, even stuck there for a few weeks. Now it clung to the bottom, and there it sat at lucky number 13 for a total on the list of 7 weeks. She had seconds, really, to take in the shop. Cookbooks and candles on an old kitchen table, holiday-themed books beside a tree. festooned with ornaments for sale, 10% off. The air smelled of books and coffee, the perfume, the perfect perfume. Behind the counter formed a reclaimed book cabinet. Caroline Stripper clapped her hands. Miranda, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you came in. What a wonderful bookstore. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Let me show you around. She got her tour while Caroline chattered and found it a warm, inviting mid-sized independent in a charming mid-sized town. She stopped by a wall of books under the banner West Bend Students Recommend. Students? That's right, elementary, middle, and high school. The teachers do a survey every month, send us a list of the top 10 student picks. If we don't have the title in stock, we order it. What a terrific idea. I has to pull some kids into the store and into the books. It does. I wish I could take the credit for the idea, but Sebastian suggested it. Miranda turned her head, struggled to keep her voice neutral. Sebastian? Sebastian Booth. He teaches English and theater at the high school. I thought you'd met him last night at Lorna's. Oh, that's right, I did. I guess he's a creative teacher with good ideas. He gets top marks from me. Our oldest grandson's a freshman at WHS, and you'd think with a granny and pop owning a bookstore, he'd be an avid reader. Not at all, until recently. Still, Robbie's not what you call avid, but he's reading. And he doesn't complain as much about the required reading now that he's in Sebastian's class. Every month, the students get to free read, pick any book they want. That's what you see up there, up here for the most part. She tapped one of the books, and happy pride bubbled in her voice. This one's Robbie's. He raved about it. It's about teenagers and zombies in London. I read it so we could talk about it. I had a book discussion with my teenage grandson. That's almost enough for me to kick Andy to the curb and run off to Aruba with Sebastian. Caroline sent Miranda a wide smile, and speaking of books, Miranda agreed to the signing, bought the t-shirt, 3 books, and a half-dozen candles. She made her way down to the real estate company and found Tracy just taking off her coat. Hi! You caught me walking in and just missed Derek. You just walked out to meet a client. How's it going in your new place? I love it. Miranda handed her a gift bag. Thank you. Thank you. Tracy peeked inside. Oh, I love candles, and I'm crazy about this jasmine scent. So Caroline said, Can you sit, have some coffee? I've had 3 cups of coffee already this morning, but thanks. I just wanted to thank you again for finding me the perfect place and making all the details go through so smooth and fast. Seska's so excited to have you here for a while. Plus, we don't get best-selling authors moving here, even for a few months. Every day of the week. Did Caroline talk you into doing an event? She did. An evening event. Signing, mingling, conversation, the middle of March. That's great. And I see her method. She gets a big bump for the bookstore, Main Street, and the town, right before the spring musical. The high school will have flyers everywhere. I heard they're doing Bye Bye Birdie this year. That's the teacher you introduced me to last night, Booth? Sebastian Booth. He runs the theater students. The spring musical's a big deal around here, and he brings it home. He tried to break in on Broadway in New York, but didn't make it. I honestly think it's their loss. So, he was an actor? The way he tells it, he was and always will be a wannabe, but he sure helps the kids shine. He's single, you know, in case you were wondering. No, Miranda made sure to laugh. I'm really not here for that, which is another reason the house works so well for me. Plenty of quiet to write in, but I'll make sure to see the spring musical. Now I'm going to stop by and see Seska before I dive right into that quiet. She drove the few blocks to Seska's. pulled in behind her godmother's sturdy sedan. Maybe she felt guilty planning to secretly pump the woman who would have stood as her mom for most of her life, but it had to be done. Seska, ash blonde hair bundled up, the sweatpants and scent of orange peel indicating she had done some cleaning, fisted a hand on her hip. Didn't I give you a key and say you never had to knock on my door? You did, but I wasn't sure you'd be up. It's 11, middle of the day. I've got the afternoon shift at the library, but that doesn't mean I lay around in bed all day. She pulled Miranda in, hugged her, swayed with it. You don't know what it means to me to have you around a while, to know you can pop in that door any time like you used to back home. Miranda hugged back. Is it still home? Seska sighed. I'm working on that. I like my little house, and it's starting to feel like my little house. And Lorna, she's been a brick for me. I'm happy to I am happy to have the chance to get to know her. I really enjoyed the party last night. I'm glad you talked me into it. You were a big hit. Now come on back and let's sit, have some coffee and coffee cake I baked, hoping it would bring you by, and gossip. Your coffee cake could lure me in from Timbuktu. They sat in the kitchen, as they had since Miranda had been a child. That kitchen had been big, sophisticated in its neutrals and shining stainless steel. This, though tiny in comparison, had soft yellow walls, sage green cabinets, and a butcher block table big enough for two. She knew the divorce had shaken Seska to the core, and couldn't understand how a man married for over 30 years could suddenly decide he didn't want to be married anymore. They had no children, so the end of her marriage had left Seska adrift. The move, Miranda thought as Seska cut the cake, poured coffee, had given her stability again. You're happy here. I needed to see it to be sure, but I can and do see it. I am. You know, I went straight from college into marriage, never once lived on my own. I'm enjoying the independence more than I ever imagined. Now I miss you, your dad, and my friends from back. Not going to keep saying home. Back in Chapel ill, but Lorna's making damn sure I make friends here. How's your dad liking Oxford? He's a kid who wakes up to Christmas morning every day. Now how do you feel about Deborah going with him? Miranda rested her chin on her fist. I like her, I really do. I don't think either of us, Dad or I, ever thought he'd have another relationship, a serious one. But she's brought a kind of lightness to his life the last couple of years and a sense of adventure. He would have wanted to take that offer from Oxford, but I'm not sure he would have if she hadn't encouraged it. Taken a sabbatical from Carolina. That word again, she thought. And leaving you. She was very kind to me after Marty left, and I won't forget. You've spread your wings, Miranda, and we're all so proud of you, but I don't think you'd have spread them far enough to come here this way if he hadn't gone there. You're probably right. Comfort zones, she thought again. She'd borrowed into hers. Emerson's a tend to root deep. I did take a short but interesting walking tour of Main Street this morning. I stopped in the bookstore. That made Caroline and Andy's day. I'll be doing a signing there in March. I think they'd have booked me for tomorrow if I'd agreed. She shook her head. Now you've made it their year. I can't wait. I really liked their shop, the feel of it. I was seriously impressed with the idea of student recs. Caroline told me that was a high school lit teacher's idea, Sebastian Booth. Yes, apparently he taught the library into the same sort of thing, and it's a nice touch. I don't really know him. Our paths haven't crossed since I moved here, but Lorna praises him to the moon and back. Does she? She does, and she's no easy mark. I did meet him last night. Seska let her eyebrows wing up. Handsome and single, I'm told. Stop. Just saying. Claudette, my supervisor at the library, said we have more Shakespeare checked out by students in the handful of years he's been here than we did in the 10 years before. You'd appreciate that. I do. He started the Shakespeare Club. Did he? She murmured. I doubt it's as well robust as your dad's, but for a small high school, it's an achievement. I'm going to warn you, Lorna's going to hit you up to come in, talk about writing to some of the students. Oh well. Seska patted Miranda's hand. Fair warning, and another to warn you Lorna tends to get what she wants. Miranda blamed the fourth cup of coffee before noon on the outsized burst of energy. After she hugged Seska goodbye, she drove around the town, out the other side, and back along the river, even stopped to take pictures with her phone. To paint on this canvas, she had to know the canvas. Since cooking didn't rank high or much at all on her list of accomplishments, she stopped to get a takeaway serving of soup to heat up later. To double check, she drove by Booth's house again, still there, before she went home. What did he do in there, she wondered, on his school break? Plan his next heist? Contact his fence? Did he have a fence? Is that how it worked? Did he still cook? Because that hadn't been a lie. The man could cook, or the boy could, anyway. Maybe he baked bread and made soup while he planned his next heist. She pulled into her driveway, then sat as it struck her. That wasn't the idea, she reminded herself as she retrieved the takeout bag and started into the house. It's a story about town secrets and the killer hiding among them. But being a thief rated as a damn secret, didn't it? A thief who cooks, maybe for a restaurant. She couldn't make him an English teacher, far too close to the bone. She put the soup in the fridge for dinner, then made a sandwich with the ham Lorna had loaded her up with the night before. She carried it and a bottle of water into the second home, into the second bedroom she'd barely set up much, less to use, as her office. She stared at her laptop, at the notebook already containing her obsessively careful and organized notes. She thought of the pages of the first draft already written, one that started with the bang of the murder of an unfaithful wife. She could change that. She could adjust that. What if the unfaithful wife lived for now, but found the diamond, no, the ruby and diamond necklace, a family heirloom, missing? No, no, not a necklace, she thought as she sat and booted up. An object. Art. A priceless object. Again, a family heirloom. A crystal bird perched on the branch of a gold tree by its nest. A nest that held a diamond egg. The faithless wife, so easily seduced by the handsome thief chef. The woman who made it so easy for him to take the bird. And its loss would cost her her life. Okay, this could work. Let's find out.